All right, guys, welcome back to another Agent Investor podcast. I'm your host, Tom Caffarella. I've got a great guest on today, Greg Moser. Greg, how's it going today?
Good. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing pretty good. So before we jumped on live, we started kind of talking about, some of the stuff that you did. And I said, hey, hold off, and because we're going to get to all this. But if you have a second, can you give us kind of a little bit of a background about like how you got started in real estate, and then walk us through kind of bit by bit, like how you got to where you are today?
Well, I first got my license when I was 18 in Ohio. So my parents both were real estate agents. My grandpa was, so something I kind of grew up in.
Yep.
And I remember when I got that then, we're talking about investments. So I remember thinking, dang, I'd like to buy this house down on, I was in my local town. And at the time it was like $30,000.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we all like to do that again today, right?
Oh man, crazy.
That was forever ago. That was back in 1988. So I've been in real estate since, and I did the traditional real estate. And then back probably around 9/11, I decided to take the full plunge into just working straight up with investors.
Yeah.
And so that's what we do. And we service large investors around the country, and been doing that since pretty much 9/11. When 9/11 happened, the phones kind of stopped ringing.
Yeah.
It was pretty chaotic. And I was like, enough of this. I'm just working with investors. And so that's what we started doing. And then, of course, we've done stuff. My wife's also a realtor. And now my kids are getting to the age where they're taking classes now to do the same. So
awesome.
So it's something that we enjoy. It's something that's kind of in our blood, and it's something we've done for years and years.
So when you got into this in the late 80s, were you thinking strictly like, I want to be, a full-time real estate agent? Or did you know, like out of the gate when you were 18, that you not only wanted to, sell houses, but also invest in real estate too?
You look back, I think I had some ideas in my mind what I wanted to do. So I kind of knew that I would always go into real estate, but it's also one of those things when you're first getting into it, you think you're maybe like, I want to do other things because that's what my parents and everyone do. So maybe it's like not so cool.
Yep.
And then, but as you go along, you're like, man, I make really good money like doing this. So as you kind of go along, then you start looking at, because you're always seeing investments. Like I said, right when I got my license, I remember looking at something thinking, wow, that'd be like a good, I started doing the math. If you rent it for $400 a month, at the time, and you start playing with those kind of things, it just made sense. So I don't know if there was like a straight up, this is exactly what I want to do my whole life. But as you go along, you find that that's what you're good at and you enjoy it.
So when would you say like you got involved with your first investment deal, and what was that like?
It was a unique story. So I went, well, there was two within like 6 months of each other. And the first one, we went to close on the house, and the person buying the house, his husband had left. At this point, I'm in Arizona, right? So the person that was buying the house, husband, they just split up and he went to Mexico. They never officially got divorced. So she's in the middle of getting the loan, and the lenders are like, hey, we got a problem here. We need this guy to sign off on it. And she hadn't talked to him for 10 years. And so long story short, the deal blew up, and my people were already, they're already committed to doing other things. And I'm like, well, I can buy it, but I don't really want to put the cash into it right now and do the loan. Can we just do a land contract? And so that's how I bought the first one. So I did a land contract, did it for a year, and then I just went and refinanced it and paid them off. And I remember they were like ecstatic that I helped them get out of the situation that we were in. And then within like around the same time, I walked into a house, and the guy was like, it was a condo, and it was kind of dumpy. And I remember like, he's like, have a seat. And I'm like, oh no, that's all right. I'll stand. It's bad when you're like, nah, that's all right. I don't want to take a seat. But he was like, if you can get me out of here for $50,000, I'll sign the papers tomorrow. And I'm like, well, you know, if we redo this house and it looks good, you can get 80, 90,000 for it. He's like, I need to be gone. If you can get me 50,000, I'm gone. I said, I'll buy it. And so I bought it and I fixed it up and flipped it off. And I think I made like 15,000 on it or 20,000 on it.
So those are like two really good examples. And
So the one was a rental, right? I kept the
Yeah.
rental. And the other one was it was a straight up flip. And
Yes.
I wasn't looking, keep in mind, I wasn't looking for either one. And I didn't want to, because they were both like customers or potential customers. I didn't want to do something that was wrong. You know, I just didn't, that's just not the way I feel. But I was very straightforward with both of them. And it was a win-win situation. It really was in both scenarios. And they both
So
were happy too.
we talk about that every week here on this show, about like the fact that every agent should invest, because you're going to come across deals even if you're not looking for them.
Yeah.
And you just talked about doing two deals where that was exactly the case. Now, in the first one, for the people who have never heard about, what a land contract was or is, how exactly did you structure that? Like, what did that look like for the seller and for you? And why was that a win-win?
You know, it's been so long, but knowing me, what it was I know I did it as an option. So I did it where I'm paying a certain amount each month.
Yep.
And then I had an option to close on it. And it might have been 2 years. Knowing me, I would have probably given myself a couple years time frame. And I'm trying to remember, I just can't. But it would have been like, do one of those deals where you put a couple years on it and then you have that time to close within that time.
Mm-hmm.
Once I had gotten in, I had it rented. I was like, just go finance it and be done with it.
Yeah.
And so I just did that. And then the flip one, I just paid him cash for that one. On that one, I just paid him cash and we closed within like a week.
Mm-hmm.
And that one's like a whole bunch of stories, like I pulled because I did a lot of the work myself on that one.
Mm-hmm.
The first ones, you want to do all the work because you want to make as much as you can. And I remember pulling the stove out and it was like at night. So I was over there like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night and I'm pulling the stove out and like cockroaches came running out from underneath the stove, like from everywhere.
Yeah.
It would have been on video camera, would have been a great, because I'm dancing, like running backwards, like, oh my God. I mean, there was hundreds of them, but it's one of those where it was ugly, but it's what you see. It doesn't take much to redo the flooring, paint the walls, redo fixtures. And that's what we did. And we flipped it. I mean, and back then you didn't have to wait 90 days either.
Yeah.
See, that didn't take until like 10 years. Man, it's probably been about 15 now. I don't know. I mean, tell me, Tom, if I'm maybe 15 years ago, they enacted that.
Yeah, it wasn't quite 15.
I remember the date. Yeah.
It wasn't quite 15. I know that because when I first started, it didn't exist. And I first started in probably like 05, 06.
It wasn't too long after though, was it?
It wasn't too long after though.
Yeah.
Yeah. It might have been like 08, 09 that
I still think that's the dumbest rule, but whatever. But so the deal then was, I mean, you wanted to get it done as soon as you could get it done and get it back up for sale. And we had it back up for sale and had it sold pretty quick. It was within 30 days and it was sold. So, but that was kind of those were the first two that we did. And I would, they weren't probably lower end housing condos, lower end neighborhoods, financially, but they both made us money. And
so after you did those first two deals, what was your mindset like? Were you thinking in your head like, I want to push down the road of becoming more of an investor? Or were you just thinking, hey, I'm an agent, I make a money doing this, and if I come across these opportunities, I know how to capitalize on them?
It's always been like, that was my side hustle. That's the term now.
Yep.
It was always like, I'll run into these deals because I'm out there working, doing real estate stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when I run across them, now we're at the point where we just, grab them and go. We're closing on a flip right now that closes on the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we're in Arizona. I think we'll make like 50,000 on it.
Yep.
I mean, but it took us, there was a lot to do on that house. It was ugly. And, we're willing to take on stuff that maybe other guys aren't. We redid the electric, we redid the plumbing. We didn't have to touch the roof, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But pretty much about everything else we touched. So we kind of still, like, on flips, we try to do like one or two at a time, kind of stagger them and keep them going.
Yep.
So that kind of is a steady, and we have a crew that kind of continually does work for us on those.
Mhm.
So we try to continually do one or two at a time, and then the other stuff, if it comes into our lap, it comes into our lap. And even flips, if we're not going to make, we'll wait until we get the right deal.
Right.
But we have with what we do, our business, we have good relationships with wholesalers. And so we're seeing stuff daily. We really don't have trouble finding something that we feel pretty comfortable with, that we can make money on. And our feeling is, if we go to flip it and it doesn't go like we thought, we can always rent it out.
Mhm.
So that's kind of our approach.
So you got into the business again in 88. You did your first couple of investment deals pretty early on. You took the approach that, you're going to do investment deals kind of when they come to you.
Yeah.
And you mentioned kind of in the beginning of the conversation that, right around the 9/11 time, you decided, like, I really don't want to work with traditional buyers and sellers anymore. What caused that? And then how did you pivot into working more on the investing side within your real estate business?
Well, at that time, I would go to people's house and list their house.
Mhm.
I was taught, my grandpa always said, listings are where it's at. You got to have listings. You're out of business if you don't have listings. And I found he was right, because even if you're working with buyers, if you have listings, you can get buyers from your listings. So it's like, okay. So we were probably, at the time, I was doing like 50, 60 listings kind of continually. There was always 50, 60 active in MLS. And we had built up a pretty good, we're getting listings pretty regularly. Shortly after, right around that time, I was still getting listings from, can I say that? Yeah, I can say their name. At the time, it was a company called Aquin, and I don't even know if they're still around now. But
Yeah, loan servicer, right?
yep. So what they were doing was foreclosures, though, and I was one of the people that listed the houses for their VA stuff, and they had some other guys, but it was mainly VA was their foreclosure that they helped move. And so I was doing that in Arizona, and if I'm getting foreclosures, guess what I was seeing? Good deals.
Yep.
And so what I did was, at the time, I was doing a radio drive time talk show with a lender, and we were doing that, twice a week on the radio. And I built up you start going after, if you're looking for investors, you'll find investors.
Mhm.
And so we started going after investors, built up a pretty good portfolio of investors. And then, we're helping them find things, as well as doing joint ventures and joint partnerships with them, and buying stuff with them along the way as well. So, I mean, that's kind of where we transitioned, because once I got to that point on 9/11, when I'm like, this is like, I had already started working towards getting investors. And then once that happened, I'm like, all right, I'm all in. I'm just going straight with the investors.
How did 9/11 though, like, impact your business, and like what was the push why did it push you in that direction at that time?
Because the phone didn't ring for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it did not ring for I mean, if you're a realtor and you got 50 listings and your phone does not ring,
Yeah.
I mean, talk about nervous. And I mean, the thing was, we were doing good. I mean, it wasn't like I was living, hand paycheck to paycheck. But, I said, okay, this is not a sustainable, and I can't handle this. Oh, we don't like the house because we don't like the paint color, in the family room. I'm like, are you serious? We're not going to buy a house because of the paint color in the family room, come on.
Yeah.
And investors, they don't look at it that way. They're like, hey, does this make sense? What's the cap rate? And it doesn't make sense, and so, at that point I said, okay, I'm all in on this. Now's the time. And that's what we did. I wasn't sure either. I didn't know how the market was going to handle all that either. what was going to happen? Was stuff going to be like fire? And that then happened in 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
But at the time, you're like, okay, is the market going to continually, is it going to just go on a downward slope? And if it is, I want to be a guy that's got a bunch of money buying that stuff.
Yep.
And so that's where we started. It ended up not working out what I was worried was going to happen at the time. But then we built it up and we're into this thing now. And then when 2007, 2008 hit, we were in a great position then to go acquire properties for nothing at auctions because, we had done what we did back in 2002 and 2003.
So what did you change? Like when you decided, hey, I want to work more with investors, what did you do in your business to make that shift?
Just focused on, we were focused on finding those people. And then, we were focused on finding investment properties to sell, building up relationships with different wholesalers, getting things in a position that we were able to acquire or sell properties, for investors and go from there. At the time we were helping with getting them rented for people as well. So we had built out some tools that could help them with doing that. And we still do that to a degree with some customers. Most of our customer base now has they have their own rental companies that do their own thing. But just kind of positioning to be able to help the investors with whatever it was, and even getting lenders that could help with loans for investments. So everything was built around working with investors.
And so were most of the investors that you were working with, were they more buy and hold? Were they more flippers? Was it a combination?
I think it was a combination.
Okay.
I always, and even to this day, a lot of those guys, I kind of go, okay, if we're going to go with the approach that we're going to buy it to flip it, we also know that if something turns on the market, if Russia invades Ukraine and the market just stops, okay, what can we do? We're going to put the thing up for rent and we'll rent it for 2 years until things settle down and go from there.
Yeah. And I love markets like that. Like my market, you can't do that at least you can't do it with single families. I'm going to make the assumption you're talking about single families and condos and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I love the markets like yours where you can buy them, you can renovate them, and then you can rent them and still be profitable. So I think, that's another big thing.
At least not get your teeth kicked in so bad.
Yeah. Well, here, say in Boston, the average single family is probably like 600,000, and then you probably rent it for like 2,500. So you get clobbered on that model here.
Do you have rent restrictions in Boston?
Not yet. They're unfortunately they're talking about them again. So I don't know if it's coming down the pike or not, but I'm fingers crossed it doesn't, because obviously that just manipulates the market. But getting back to your story, so you focused on finding investors, finding investment deals, and obviously even some of the property management to help those people get off the ground. So now, how has your business evolved kind of since then, since the early 2000s?
So then around 2011 is when it really took a big change. So the market was it was probably 2009. The market was in the toilet. And in Arizona, they were doing what they called, apartment conversions, condo conversions. And what they're doing was they were taking condos, or they were taking apartments and converting them into condominiums.
Yep.
And some big money was behind on that. And I was working with a couple guys that had gotten themselves halfway into selling them as condos. And I took my group of investors and said, hey, we negotiated a really good deal to buy these properties. We can get them. So we went into a couple complexes that had 75, 100 units. We sold them to our investors as, individually. They weren't buying like all 100 or 75, but we ended up buying 100 units or 75 units. And so we were helping them we were kind of treating it as if we were one big company. We negotiated a really good deal to help get those properties. And then we were going in and buying it. Well, some of those guys that were in there at that point, then some institutional guys started to be formed. And, of course, the guys that I helped there then became vice presidents and presidents of some of these big institutional guys. And they're like, hey, if we want to move stuff, Greg Moser's like, his group's good. So we started then at that point, that's just basically how it worked. We started helping them with acquisitions and stuff that they were doing. And for the last 8 to 10 years, that's pretty much what we've been doing, is helping these institutional guys get their investment properties as our core business. That's what we do. And, we'll buy 3,000 homes, we'll get 3,000 homes this year nationwide.
Yeah.
So, and we're in all the big markets. They're not doing much in Boston. And I think it's just what you're saying. They're not getting the return there.
You can't get so I'm sure you're probably not in San Diego. You're not in Boston. You're not in, a lot of California. Like,
no.
What market?
And it also goes to, and I don't want to get political, but it really does go to,
for a landlord, you want to be in a state where if someone's not paying you,
you can get them out.
Fairly easy to get them out. I mean, it's not a complicated thing.
No.
And anyone who's listening to this, you could feel either way about it. But if you're the one who's the landlord, you certainly want to be in a state where if someone's not paying you. Yeah, you want to be able to get them out. So
we're in so what we're saying is they were in California for a long time.
Oh, okay.
In Chicago for a long time. But even some of these cities got so ridiculous. It was like the requirements, they send some inspector in and he stops a rental. I'm not dealing with it directly, but your smoke detector is not 6 inches off the wall.
Yeah.
So we're going to you can't rent it until we come back and re-inspect it. Well, and then, when can you come back? I can do it right now. Nope. Can't do it right now. You got to come back. Okay, we'll schedule you next week. That doesn't even make common sense, but that's what they deal with. So they're like, you know what, forget it. We're just going to sell everything there and you guys can deal with it yourself. So Chicago, they got out, they're out. California, they've held because it's still doing good property value, but they're not buying anything there. They're not buying anything in Washington anymore.
Yeah.
Still buying in Colorado, but not nearly as much. But we're heavily buying in Texas, Arizona, Florida. Go figure. Alabama, North Carolina. There's 20 some different markets.
Yeah, and I think that's
that we're kind of doing stuff in. Yeah.
And that's all the stuff that if you're somebody who's a newer investor, one of the first things that you need to think about is where am I going to invest? Yeah. And in an ideal world, you would be able to invest in your backyard because you're going to know your backyard the best. But you also have to be careful about what Greg is mentioning, which is is my backyard conducive for investing? Yeah. And you can definitely invest and make money in any state, whether it's, you're going to be a landlord or flip houses, you can make money in every state, but there are definitely some areas where it's easier. And so it's just, something else to kind of consider.
Yeah. And I've gotten to that where we'll do stuff in other states, but it's just something in my gut. I like to be closer to what I'm dealing with, at least if I get in big time. Or it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm keeping it as a rental, I really don't like having stuff out of state.
Yep.
And I have licenses in multiple states. So I'm in Texas a lot. We do a lot there. I have a place in Texas when I'm there. So it's not, that one I feel more comfortable with. But if we're going to do something in Georgia, I'm a little hesitant just because I'm not there. I don't know all the things going on. And I have people there and I trust them, but it's still my money.
Yeah, it's tough. I can say that, I've probably flipped a little bit over 1,000 homes, and the ones I lose money on, it's always the area that I don't know that great.
That you're yeah.
Well, maybe I think I know, but I really don't know that area. And that goes even for me being able to drive somewhere. So never mind going to another state where, there's different laws, there's different rules, there's different people, there's different everything. So
is that your main business? Do you guys how many do you do at a time? on flips.
We will usually carry between 30 and 50 at a time.
Yeah.
And so we also have a brokerage, and we've got, a rental portfolio as well.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to ask you, because I think you really grew up in a real estate family.
Yeah.
So did your family, did your parents who were in the business, or whoever was in the business within your family, were they investing as well, or were they just selling?
No, they were investing. So
Okay.
I think they didn't have like what you got, but they had at one point, I think they had 15, 16 rentals.
Okay.
And I remember in my teens, and this is in Ohio. Okay. So like these houses were built, geez, there's some houses that had been built in the early 1900s. I think most of what they had been post World War II homes, guys that came home from the war.
Yep.
Built. So I think those were mostly 1950s. I'd have to go look, but I think late 40s, early 50s was most of their houses.
Mhm.
And, I remember one time we were standing there, and I think I was like 17, 18, and we're at the real estate office, and my mom was on the phone, and me and my dad were like just standing there, and she's like, yeah, we'll take it. And we're like, my dad's like, take what? Oh yeah, we just bought a house, And he was like, what the heck are you doing? But it was one of those where the church, it was in a neighborhood that they had already owned. They had 2 or 3 houses on the street, and the church had been given a house and they didn't want the house.
Yep.
So they just wanted to sell it. And they were like, hey, will you buy it for 15,000? And she was like, yeah, we'll take it. But after we found out what she paid for it, we're like, yeah, that was a good buy, okay. But so, yeah, that was the world I grew up in. The people move out and you got to go clean up the house. That's what I would do one summer through my teen years.
Nice.
Go clean up the house that they had left all their junk in.
So obviously you and your family have had a lot of success, not only just, selling houses, but investing yourselves and helping other people invest. So what would you say to the agent who's just working with buyers and sellers and doesn't have any sort of like investment tie-in? Like how did it change your business? And what would you say to the person who doesn't have any sort of investment tie-in, either for themselves or working with investors?
I think you got to at some point have some investors, because you're going to run into stuff. And you can either help get it, or if you're not getting it for yourself, you got to have like a handful of guys that you can call up and say, hey, I got a deal, or I saw a deal today when we were going through houses. Do you want it? And it might not be as much today because it's such a strong seller's market, but that's going to change. It's not always going to be like this. I don't care what they tell you. When interest rates go up, it's going to slow down. So with that being said, I think my experience is you have to, even when I was just doing that, you have to have a group of guys that you can call up and say, hey, this house needs work, but if you can go put 20, 25 into it, it's a nice rental, or you can flip it or whatever. Because you're going to run into those houses where the people don't have the money to re-put the carpet in, the dog peed all over it, and they do the best they can, but it's just not really ready for move-in. And, but they got to sell the house. And, you're kind of you're not doing your customer service by having somebody that you can call and help move something. So I feel no matter what, you got to have some people in your pipeline that you can help move things too.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we always talk about. Like a lot of times, I think when people think about investing or investors, they think for some reason that someone's going out there and just like stealing a house from somebody.
Yeah.
And it's because they haven't seen it, so they don't understand it. They may see an investor get a great price, but they don't see the conditions that
You guys told me I just want 50,000 and we're out of here. I mean,
yeah,
this was our conversation. I said, I can buy this like now, but you understand if we could clean this place up. I'm like, you got to clean this up. He's like, I know. I go, if we can clean this place up and, maybe if you can maybe put a couple thousand into it, you can get another $15,000, $20,000 out of it. And he's like, nope, I need to be gone as soon as possible. I want it gone like tomorrow. And, we had that conversation. It was like, I wasn't cheating him. I wasn't trying to pull the wool over his eyes. And because it was something I went out on the listing for, but he was ecstatic. He was like happy.
And that's the part that I think a lot of people just don't see, that conversation
Yeah.
where, you, not that you're pushing them one way or the other, but you're kind of like,
I was kind of though at that one.
well,
I
I
was
think,
scared, Tom. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I was like, I don't want to be looked at as somebody that's trying to pull one on this guy.
well, I think what happens, and this happens to me sometimes, is like, you put yourself in that person's shoes and you're like, if I was this person, I would put the 2,000 in
Yep.
and I would sell it for more.
Yeah.
But I think the part that like can be difficult sometimes to understand is like, someone's in a different situation than you and they make a different choice. And that choice, it may not be what you want or what you would do, but it's the right choice for that person at that time. And, there's been plenty of houses that we've bought where, sometimes even they can sell as is for more, but because of reason XYZ, they don't want it. And I think if you're an agent that doesn't have the ability to either buy it yourself or an investor, then they're just going to find somebody else. So you lose the listing and you lose the deal because you're trying to like